we're focusing on long-acting methods. These are government people. We are training 1,800.
Wow.
And it's about 35 or 40% of the total government family planning cadre.
Right. And is
going surprisingly well. It's going much better than I thought, to be honest. Last year, these 1,800 providers who we have been now training for 2 years provided 820,000 IUDs and implants.
wow.
Unfortunately, the same buy-in doesn't exist for vasectomy. We are promoting vasectomy in Nigeria on our own, but the government has not warmed up to it yet.
Mm-hmm. Do you think is Nigeria, are you trying to get more of a base in West Africa in general?
Yeah, we would love to. And we are pushing it in some other countries, but really, it's been really an uphill struggle.
What do you think is the major reason in a country like Nigeria the government doesn't get involved with vasectomy?
I think the government would like to, but the men in the community needs to warm up to it, and the government is afraid to push it too far for political reasons without the demand coming from the men.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not because the government is not playing a huge role in demand creation, even for female methods. But women having to be the ones bearing the brunt of the burdens of pregnancy, they have a much faster growing demand for birth control and birth spacing and birth limiting. And
yeah.
government wants to make sure that there is somebody there to meet that demand. But because men don't have the same, the biological burden on them, the natural demand rate of growth of demand is less.
Mm-hmm.
If create that
where of the places that Mari Stopes works, where are you seeing success when it comes to vasectomy acceptance, or the most success?
urban only.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, that's the thing. Listen, the camera doesn't focus very well. I don't know why.
I think it's me. Don't worry about it. I think it's my camera. You're pretty good. You look pretty good.
Ah, right. Okay. Because it works much better with Skype on my end. But if this is enough for you guys, then that's fine for me.
Yeah, I think it's okay. I think it looks fine.
Okay, yeah. Sorry. Going back. So yeah, every country in Africa where we are promoting vasectomy, the uptake, however small, comes from urban settings, and that is something we see globally. I mean, countries where social economic development is higher has higher uptakes, and it goes hand in hand with education, gender equality, and male involvement in the less conventionally savvy parts of family planning.
Is there is there any place that is a success story where you go, oh, that's working, and that you can understand why it's working?
In Africa or in the
well, first in Africa, and then maybe first in Africa and then globally.
In Africa, not really. There are only 10 countries out of the 54 sub-Saharan African countries that have measurable vasectomy numbers. And of those, only 3, and that's, if I'm not mistaken, South Africa, Swaziland or Eswatini, and one more that has a vasectomy prevalence of over 0.1%, which is
nothing.
But
that's more than other places.
Yeah. Those 3 are the champions in Africa, which in comparison to Asia is nothing. And Asian uptake, where India, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, Nepal, have some uptake, but that's because these countries had large scale government programs that sort of brought the method to the forefront and got the general population to a point where they're comfortable with it, they can talk about it, and it's a conversation that people can have, and the vasectomy name is not associated with taboo or too much myths and misconceptions. But the
Gotcha.
global leaders are, Northern America, Canada leading everybody else by a mile, US, UK, Switzerland, Belgium, Australia. This is where the method is significantly taken up.
Yeah. Do you think in the Asian countries like Bangladesh, is it doing pretty well?
In comparison to other low middle income countries, yes. I mean, we ourselves provide about 40,000 vasectomies in Bangladesh every year.
Wow.
Yeah. So last year, if I'm not mistaken, we did 30,000 plus. And since the Indian government started compensating or reimbursing vasectomy service costs, our numbers in India is also coming up. So we are looking to do more than 5,000 this year. But that number has a lot more growth potential. And I would not be surprised if we are doing 20,000 in a year or two.
In India?
In India. Which for India is not much, but as I mentioned, the government only started reimbursing male sterilization the way they used to reimburse female sterilization only 2 years ago.
Are they still reimbursing female sterilization?
Yes, they are. Yes, they
What is Mary Stopes' policy on reimbursing for family planning services?
What do you mean exactly?
Well, if you do the vasectomy, does the government still reimburse the person who gets the vasectomy, or is that something you have to do?
No, the government reimburses both the recipient and the provider.
Uh-huh. And so what personally, or from a Murray Stopes perspective, do you have any kind of resistance to that kind of reimbursing policy, or is that something that's comfortable with your own perspective?
We are comfortable with it. Our Indian team would be the best to speak on this, but we have been working with the Indian government family planning programs for a while, and we were very happy to see that the government started reimbursing vasectomy services, because we were finding it difficult to self-fund them. So currently we work in Uttar Pradesh, Rajasthan, and Bihar. And we are comfortable with the current system. There are always glitches, given that it's such a large-scale program and it's a large bureaucratic machine. But we are happy in general with the things as they are.
Do you think you didn't go to Nairobi, I guess, for the conference?
No, Simon was there. I was not. I was in Nigeria.
Mm-hmm. And are you seeing overall, is family planning, we see across the world that the replacement rate is being reached in a lot of places, numbers are going down, family size. Are you seeing kind of a greater general acceptance of family planning services in most parts of the world?
Absolutely. Every statistic that we see show an upward trend, and what we see on the field matches what we see in the statistics.
Mm-hmm.
We see in Africa especially, the gap between male fertility intentions and female fertility intentions, that gap is narrowing. Both men and women across Africa seem to be wanting less children. There are big differences within Africa, but this trend is seen across the continent. So, for example, if you look at the broader regions, I would say the fertility intentions in Eastern Africa are less than that of Western Africa, and the developing, the better developing or the faster developing economies in Southern Africa are doing better than Western Africa as well. It's countries like Niger and maybe Congo, Chad, Central African Republic, and to some degree Nigeria, where the modern method uptake is not as good as the other countries in Africa. That's what we see.
You know, you were saying before that the demand for men, you know, by men to pursue options like vasectomy, you know, there isn't the same urgency or the same, you know, feeling of, you know, it's not as prevalent in the person's consciousness because obviously men don't get pregnant. I'm wondering if, nevertheless, in some ways, there's a growing shift in masculinity, how men perceive themselves in relationship to their fertility, that hasn't quite filtered down to the level of campaigns and programs, only because wherever we go, we discover in urban areas, admittedly, but there are a lot of people in urban areas, we're seeing more and more men who are more predisposed to want to take on the responsibility or the control, you might say, of family planning through a vasectomy and are less deterred by traditional myths and misconceptions about what a vasectomy is. In other words, there is a shifting consciousness amongst young men around the world, and you know, and yet, of course, there are not a lot of options. But that vasectomy being really the only viable long-term option for men, permanent, in fact, is growing. There's more openness to it, even if there hasn't been any major campaigns, except probably our own is one of the few that really pushes for vasectomy.
Yes, we see that. The concept of not wanting to leave fertility to chance is growing in Africa, and men won't. There's a bigger demand from men who say, "I don't want to leave my future fertility to chance," and they tend to come and ask for vasectomies in much larger numbers, let's say compared to 10 years ago or even 5 years ago. For example, our Nigeria program recently launched a very good, in my opinion, campaign focusing on exactly that, saying, why do you leave your fertility to chance? Why do you leave it in the hands of somebody else? Be a man, take responsibility, take control. And I'm hopeful that that would speak to the modern West African men that we see, especially in urban settings. But as with many methods, as with long-acting methods for the women, usually these things do start up in the urban settings, but they filter through. I have hope that this will continue. I think it's a matter of, will the demand and will the uptake grow as fast as we would like it to grow? But the fact, if you ask the question, is the demand growing? I think the answer is yes. And is the level of comfort with vasectomy growing? Once again, I think the answer is yes. It's just a matter of how fast they are growing.
Yesterday, we had a very beautiful conversation we set up between, it was like an audiovisual workshop between young people who were involved with Mari Stopes in Uganda and a group of young people in Colombia. And it was really beautiful. They came up with a crowdfunding campaign where the Colombians were going to crowdfund for Ugandans, but the theme was to get men to talk about sexuality as an act of love, and for women to talk about sexuality as pleasure.
Yes.
That both, you know, that men talk about sex as pleasure, but don't about love, and women talk about love, but they don't talk about pleasure. So they wanted to develop a media campaign to sort of, you know, bring them both together in a shared dialogue. But it was quite beautiful because, you know, the way they work together. And so we're going to have that on Friday. We'll be sharing the results of that and where they're creating, where they're just going to develop their own crowd campaign here in Colombia to raise money for a few $1,000s, but at least sort of a kind of a South-South alliance of young people raising money through technology. So we'll,
That's great. That is great.
Yeah, we'll let you know. And today we had a conversation with men in India and Australia and Colombia, just asking questions and sharing their own concerns and fears. But actually, there were men who had gotten vasectomies in Australia and in Colombia who were answering the questions. So it was a way to kind of get men to talk to men, to sort of start to build that bit of a dialogue. It was very beautiful. There were 5 clinics in India that were involved. And again, it's just, we're experimenting with this sort of storytelling and using media to build, dialogue and bridges between cultures that don't necessarily ever share ever. They never get to talk to each other.
Absolutely. I think the concept of champions has always been recognized as a way to get vasectomy to a more popular place. I mean, if you look at the evidence, there are 3 things that keep coming up. What are the things that's necessary to get vasectomy to a more popular place in societies? What comes up always is political will, serious government commitment, champions who take up the method, talk about their experience and promote it and help to dispel myths and misconceptions. And then the third one that comes up is the availability of the services. As close to home as possible, providing vasectomy services through mobile teams, turning it into a daycare minor surgical procedure that anybody can walk in, have, and go back to their daily life and carry on. These 3. And I think this concept of yours this time of World Vasectomy Day, of the Vasectomy Without Borders, getting champions to talk to people across countries, I think that's a brilliant idea. And we should do that every year.
Yeah, we can really build on that. Okay, I'm going to leave you, Damika. I know it's late in England. I had one last question. Could you put me in touch with the country director or clinic director in India and Bangladesh? Because we would like to get more connections with them. I lost, there was a woman named Hashrat. I think she was in Bangladesh, but I have lost touch with her. And I'm just wondering if there's a new country director.
Yeah, I can definitely do that. We have a brilliant clinical director called Rashmi in India, and Chandra, who was our country director all the time. He's still there, and he's a big champion. Our country director in Bangladesh is Masrul, and the clinical director you should talk to should be Samina.
Okay.
I'll put you in touch with.
Yeah, if you just send me email and just to link us together, I'll take it from there. We have some really nice. I'm going to share with you. We came up with this idea this year, which I'd love for your opinion on it. It's not quite ready, and it's in Spanish with English subtitles. But it's introducing family planning options to educate men about women's choices, and men's choices too. But we use soccer, football.
Okay.
So I'm really curious. We want to do it with cricket too, but I just want to know what you think about the concept when you see it. I'll send it to you by WhatsApp.
I'm pretty sure I'd love it. I've been telling this to our countries all the time. Like the countries that are football crazy get some known figures to talk about it. And in India, if you can get somebody like Virat Kohli to talk about vasectomy, man, this is gonna go viral.
Yeah, you're gonna see. You'll see what we did. It's we just showed it last night. We had a webinar yesterday in Bogota, and it was great. And this year, for the first time, we never did this before, but we made an alliance with the Colombian Army, and they're really great. I mean, they sort of bought into World Vasectomy Day as a sort of a kind of unifying their relationship with the public. Showing that the military was.
If you can get some Latin American football stars to get on board, that will reverberate across continents.
Yeah, we got to get Messi.
Yeah, I was going to say.
We'll get Messi. All right, look, have a wonderful day. Thank you so much for everything, Damika. We'll be in touch as well.
Absolutely. Good
Take
luck.
care. Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.